Welcome, everybody, to the Heal Your Hunger Show. So happy to have you here. It is a great day to be alive. And don't you just love that intro song? I love it. It's so jazzy. All right, I want to just get right into this interview. It's amazing. Dr. Aimie Apigian is the leading medical expert on how life experiences get stored in the body. She is the founder of the signature model and methodology called the Biology of Trauma, which is also the name of her new book that is ready for pre-order, and you'll hear about that as well on this show. But Dr. Aimie is amazing. And if you're an emotional eater or a food addict, take the quiz on my website to find out which one you are. But if you struggle with food in any way, chances are trauma has something to do with your cravings. And so we dig into how to really start getting curious when you have cravings so you can stop the cycle of binge eating, emotional eating, restrictive eating, whatever you do with food, so you can finally heal and live a happier life. So I'm excited for Dr. Aimie to be here on with the show. Dr. Aimie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Tricia. It's good to be back. I'm excited for this conversation on parts.
Me too. This is really important. We hear a lot about this. I know you teach on this and you do such a beautiful job with people understanding themselves and the effects of trauma and the healing of trauma, which I love you for. And then I have people, loved ones in my family who talk a lot like about this stuff as therapists, and it's just, it's something we hear more and more about, but I want people to understand from someone who really understands it what this is about. Can you kind of just give us a whole kind of scenario of what parts work is?
Absolutely. And let me share by saying that this was not something that I naturally gravitated to myself because I didn't understand parts at first. And it wasn't until I took my adopted son to a therapy that incorporated an element of parts work, and I saw it transform him over 3 days. And when I saw what it did for him, I went and became trained in that trauma therapy. In fact, it was the first trauma therapy program that I went and got trained in as a medical physician because I saw the impact that it had on him. We are talking about a boy who had gone from wanting to kill me, trying to kill me. I had taken him in as a 4-year-old foster care and then adopted him when he was 5. And he had severe abuse, neglect. He had been in the foster care system for age 9 months. And so he had a lot of that trauma. But by the time we got to this therapy, I'd had him for more than 5 years, 5.5 years, and not much had changed, Tricia.
Wow.
We had just gotten stuck where he was constantly in protection mode, and not just like, I'm going to retreat to protect. He was an aggressive protect my heart. And so I was completely lost. I started searching all over for different solutions. The evidence-based therapies, the play therapies and whatnot, were not helping him at all. In fact, they were making things worse at home with me. His behaviors would be worse. And we're talking like hour-long rages, 2-3 hours of me having to just hold him because he was a danger to himself, a danger to me, and was going to destroy the house. And so it was exhausting. It was awful. So when we went from that to him walking down a country road with me as we walked to the store, and for the first time, he reaches out to hold my hand. For the first time ever, he reaches out to hold my hand after being with me for 5 years.
Wow.
And he looks into my eyes, which before had only been something that he would only do when he was lying to me, is look in my eyes. But he looked in my eyes and he says, "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for all you've done for me."
Wow.
So I get chills right now, just remembering that moment. That's what parts work did for him. Now, I took that and I still worked with it to understand, well, it's not just parts work. Like, parts work is a general term. What exactly happened here? And it was part of a process that it's an art narrative process where we go and we work on a story in the past. And in that process, we help our left brain and our right brain come to understand that the story is over. And I
Mm,
think that's an essence of parts work, is that there are parts of us that had previous experiences in our lifetime and they're still not over it. They still don't know that the danger is over, which means that they're still carrying out the same survival strategies that we did at that time of our life. And Miguel could see that. Miguel could now see clearly that, oh, when I hit my mom, that's not who I really am.
mm.
That's not what I really want to be doing. But I was that little child of me that was abandoned by my birth mom was triggered. And there was so much anger that that younger part holds that hasn't been resolved, that that part did something that I want to work with. And so now being able to say, that's not who I am. That's not who I really want to be. And I can work with this part so that we can do something different moving forward. So for me, that's the big picture and the essence of parts work, is really being able to work on a story of our past to change how we react in our present day, because we're working on the story with that part of us, but not going back into the story and just meddling and stirring things up, but without resolving it or having the tools to change. How do I respond to my life, my relationship, my conflicts, my problems today?
I love that. Thank you for that explanation. That is beautiful. And what I love about it is there's an objectivity to it. So it's like I am not my story. It's the story was back there, right? It was what happened then. It's not who I am now. Let me, sit and observe, what happened and how it affected me and how to heal it without claiming it as my identity.
And that's a powerful part of parts work, is being able to stay in a third person observing role rather than saying, this is me, this is all of me, I still am living in this story. No, I am here, I am in the present day, I'm an adult Aimie, for example. And when I have those kinds of strong reactions, I can see that there's something from my past that's still being stirred up, that I can tend to that part that gets triggered with fear, rather than letting it, as I say, drive my bus and drive the way that it normally would down the road, which usually doesn't end well for me.
Right. And I can see this as a really important key and tool for emotional balance or emotional mastery, although I think mastery is not the right word when we're talking about our emotions, but at least finding some equilibrium and not being in reaction mode all the time.
A lot of people that I work with relate to the experience that I had before I started this work, which is we get overwhelmed by our own feelings, which is why we can develop the coping mechanism of overeating or
Right.
undereating, is because we don't want to feel. And that is one way to block that out. And so when we become overwhelmed by our own feelings, what if I could just start to introduce language that says, oh, there's that part of me that feels so much grief for what I've been through. And then all of a sudden it puts a little distance, and I don't have to be overwhelmed by the grief, but yet I'm not also ignoring, avoiding, or overeating as a result of that grief.
It's sort of like you're sitting next to the seat of grief instead of in the seat of grief.
Exactly. That's the beauty of parts work. That is very simply put how to start with parts work. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that.
I love that. This is beautiful. So, can you kind of walk us through how one develops language around dealing with a part or how one starts to even have that conversation with themselves?
You know, yes, because a lot of people who come through my courses, they ask me, does this mean that I have multiple personality disorder?
Right.
And the answer is no. The answer is no. We all have parts of us, and that does not mean that we have multiple personality disorder. So
Yeah, because we have lots of emotions. I mean,
exactly.
emotional eaters are emotional people. We have so much going on, even in a moment or one incident that's just a, seemingly negligible incident. And yet we have all kinds of feelings around that one thing. Like they were out of, pecans at the grocery store. You know? It's like, what am I gonna, I mean, I'm telling you, for overactive minds like emotional eaters have, which are connected with overactive emotions, there's a lot going on.
Absolutely. And this is where I start to see it as a beautiful design of who we each are. If we only were one part, we'd be very boring because we'd only be able to do one thing. But instead, I experience joy and I experience sadness.
Yep.
I experience connection and I experience beautiful solitude because
Yeah.
I have this range in which I can experience all those different aspects of myself. There was a great movie, Inside Out. That is a great movie on parts, and it focused on four different parts, four different emotions. And the idea was that each emotion took the steering wheel, for lack of better word, at a time. And that's true. Only one part can really be driving our life at one given time. And so in that movie, when sadness was driving the bus, everything was just bleak and woe is me and gloomy. And right. And then joy
Yeah.
would take over and was just like, oh, the sun is shining. Oh, this is great. Oh, that's lovely.
Right.
And we can think that we are weird, that we are confusing if we don't understand, oh, that's just a part of me. This is my joy part. I can let my joy part out and know that this is a moment for this part to have its time in the spotlight. The other way that I look at it is there are different responsibilities that we have. Even with you and with me, we have work. I'm sure many of your audience has work. And the part of them that shows up to work is different than the part of them that plays with their grandkids because it's a different mindset. It's a different state of being.
Yeah.
You wouldn't interact with your grandkids the same way that you work with your colleagues.
Right.
It's a different way of thinking. And that's just it. It's a different part of you. So that if one person had to do public speaking, well, at that moment that they stand up to do public speaking, that's a part of them that says, I can take the helm.
Yeah.
I can stand up and I can speak, even though, Tricia, there may be, and there likely always is, another part of them that if they were to listen to that part would say, I'm terrified to speak in front of these people.
Yeah.
I'm scared to death. I want to hide.
Yeah.
But unless that part takes over, usually it's the part that says, no, I got this. I can do this. That's the
Absolutely.
part. So just noticing like the different mind chatter, right? And the going back and forth. For me, that always felt like, my goodness, like I must be a schizophrenic because like
Yeah.
all of these voices are in my head and they all want something different and tell me to do something different. How can I ever make a decision? And
Exactly.
yet when I could break it down, be like, oh, this part is afraid of this and so wants this. But this part knows that it's capable and likes the challenge and so wants to do this. And here's where it gets real is that most of the time, until we understand that we have competing parts sometimes, we are just going to run right over a part and not listen to what they're saying. We're not listening to what they're afraid of. Rather, if we can, going back to the public speaking, if in that moment that we hear that voice of, oh, I'm scared,
I
we
can't do this.
I can't do this. I want to run. I want
I'm
to
gonna
hide.
fail.
I'm gonna fail. What if we could pause and we could find some way? And my way is often, hands to my chest or one hand on my belly, because that's where a young part of me tends to show up a lot. What if I could connect with that part and say, I hear you. I hear you. And I'm going to let this other part stand up and speak for us because I know you're scared. And what happens in that moment is that there's this internal peace that happens because we haven't bulldozed over a part that is trying to tell us, I'm scared, I'm scared. We've listened to it, we've heard it. We don't give it the steering wheel, we don't allow it to drive the bus, but there's an element of peace and internal calm that comes with having acknowledged, heard, seen, understood a part, and tended to it, while then still taking the action that we want to do in life.
It's so compassionate.
Yes.
Yeah, because what we tend to do is say, I shouldn't feel that way, right? Like dismiss, dismiss, and bad girl, like, I'm bad because that even entered my mind, which is so not compassionate, right? It's like our thinker thinks. That's what it does, right? Our feelings feel. And so we shouldn't be beating ourselves up over that, but giving, like you're saying, give it a voice, just not the ability to steer.
Exactly. And each of those voices has a story. And in the moment, it's not always the right thing to go deep into the story. But if we really want to tend to that part of us, we can come and we can say, why are you so afraid of this? Why do you push people away? Why do you run for the chocolate every time that work gets too hard? Tell me about this. Help me understand. And that allows for a deeper understanding of ourselves that allows us to create change in our life. Rather, the other way is like what you've just described, beating ourselves up, criticizing ourselves, expecting unrealistic things like not even having a thought. Whereas this other approach allows for a self understanding, a self compassion, but also brings in the change that is possible so that we're not still just stuck in that fear, don't understand why we have it, and don't have the tools to change it. The whole point of parts work for me is to be able to work with the parts so I understand, why do they believe what they believe? Why do they want to do what they do, so that I can meet their needs in a different way? Oh, I see you're really scared about being unlovable and finding that this person might really see the real you and find that you're unlovable. Yeah, I know that that's a story that you've had. I'd like to take care of that. What if I just spent 5 minutes with you and I just held you and I just rocked you, and we're going to get through this, rather than running to the kitchen right now?
Yeah.
And that way it allows me to actually tend to their needs rather than stuffing, ignoring, and avoiding their needs.
Oh, how beautiful. And that is the conversation, right? What are we really hungry for? And what's going on that makes us think all of a sudden that food is the answer? So, are we necessarily going back when we ask that, when we get curious, and curiosity is so important? When we listen to that part and we get curious about where, how it came about that we would think such horrible things about ourselves, that we're useless and unlovable and failures. Is it always we're going back to our past? Is it always connected to our history?
It is. And that's also something that I struggled with at first because I hated that answer. I hated the fact that it always went back to my past.
Who
But
wants
what
to
we
go there? I don't want to go there.
no, I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
And yet what we know in from science, and it's actually all of chapter 11 in my book on the biology of trauma, is called the pre-existing filter. Pre-existing filter.
Okay.
We have an internal filter that we come into every experience of life with. It's not an option to come into an experience and not have that filter come with us. And just like any camera or lens filter or even a glasses, it changes how we experience it, how we perceive it, how we thus respond to it. And our past does create that filter. There's no way that we can put our past aside and ask it to not filter our present experiences. It's going to be there. That's how our body helps us survive. And so it's wired into our nervous system. Our body is like a historical book. All of the wisdom is there. Everything that we've been through is there. But more importantly, Tricia, it's what has been unresolved that's
Yes.
still there.
Amen.
Because we can have experiences in our past that we have healed, that we have resolved. And that changes the filter. So the most important things are those things that we have not resolved. They will be creating a filter that creates a very different perspective for ourselves. There's a term that's called neuroception. It's the perception of our nervous system, meaning my nervous system perceives what is going on and how much danger I'm in, based partly on this filter and the information that it's collecting at the moment. It's not based on reality, Tricia.
Mm.
Our responses are not based on reality. They are based on my pre-existing filter that determines my experience and my perspective of what does this mean for me. But meaning comes with a historical context, because otherwise a snake is just a snake until you've had a past experience where other people around you were scared of the snake. And now there's some historical context that makes that snake now scary in the present moment. So meaning always has a historical story and context.
And my clients know this because I always say when we're hysterical, it's historical. Not that we're hysterical, but when our head can get into a spin, which is somewhat hysterical. I'm gonna fail, I suck, I'm a loser. I mean, this is where my head goes. It still can go there. I mean, it's certainly, I'm not cured of this. It's a lot quieter, but you get me scared enough and it's telling me all kinds of crazy things.
And that's just it, right? Like when we can function within a certain window and be doing well, where no parts of us are being triggered. But the closer you come to what I call the critical line of overwhelm, where a stress is going to turn into a trauma for your body, your survival strategies and patterns are going to come out, and there's nothing you can do to stop it.
Okay, so let's talk about strategies. All right. So when we do observe that we're in a spin and it's historical, what do you suggest people do?
There's the science around pattern interruption. And this is also what we need to apply when it comes to trauma patterns, survival patterns. We need to interrupt the pattern in some way. Now, ideally, we're going to interrupt it in a healthy way.
Yeah,
Because
let's go
otherwise,
with that.
exactly. Otherwise, we're just replacing one coping mechanism with another. What have we really accomplished?
Right,
Not much. We've moved sideways, not forward.
right.
So, how can we interrupt a pattern in a positive way? What I started to do when I was working with my overeating issues was let me take a walk. Let me take 5 minutes and I'm going to take a walk. That was a pattern interruption for me because before I would just go straight to the cupboard. Let me make a phone call. That was a pattern interruption for me. I was not one to naturally reach out and connect with someone. I wasn't going to tell them, hey, I'm thinking of overeating right now. Will you talk me through? No, that's not. I mean, at one point I did have a OA sponsor, but no, that was otherwise. I'm just trying to interrupt the pattern, right? Of this. I feel overwhelmed. I go to the kitchen. That was the pattern, the survival pattern for me that went all the way back to my childhood. And so I was starting to find ways in which I could pause. The pause is where we have the power. If I can create space, then I have the power to choose a different response. And so my pattern interruption was all about how do I just create a pause, create a space to interrupt that pattern of overwhelm, overeating, overwhelm, overeating.
I love that. The power of the pause. Yeah, there you go. I love that. So important. And I also, what helps me and I recommend to people as well is writing. Like I sort of rat out my mind and my thoughts. I'm like, that's it. I'm committing you to paper. And I write all the craziness out. I can when I'm in that terrible state of that frenzy, right? The hysterical frenzy, When I write down all the ridiculous negative thoughts that my mind is throwing at me, that's what they become, ridiculous negative thoughts. They're no longer truth, and there's that one, 1 seat away, right? Instead of sitting in it, we're sitting next to it. Oh, that's just a bunch of hooey, not who I really am.
And that brings us back to kind of how we started this conversation, the ability to gain a third person observer seat as opposed to being in the middle of the mess.
Yep.
Can I sit next to the mess, look at the mess, get curious about the mess, but not get stuck in the middle of the mess, not be the mess.
Amen. I love that. This is such a useful conversation. Thank you so much. I really wanted to introduce this, to emotional eaters who aren't familiar with it yet. And you have such a beautiful way of explaining things, and making it so accessible. You actually teach this specific topic about parts work, right?
I do. And the reason is I found it essential. I have found it to be an essential piece for someone's healing. If they only do the talk therapy, if they only do the body work, if they only even do the functional medicine and the biology, it's still not going to be enough. I have found parts work to be an essential piece. So I teach a whole 3-week course just on parts. It's called All Parts of Me, because we do have all parts of us and they all are needed to be seen, heard, understood, and welcomed. And we don't leave any parts of us behind, but we also need to learn how to negotiate with them. So in that course, I teach people how to identify the different parts of themselves, communicate, and then finally negotiate.
Beautiful. Can you talk about your book? I'm so excited about your book.
Yes, this is the Biology of Trauma book, and it's broken into 3 sections. And the first section is on how the body experiences trauma. What makes a trauma? What makes it different than a stress? It's a very defined moment, and we need to define what that moment is. The second section is, all right, so if that happened one time in my life, why the heck is my body still holding on to it now, decades later? Section 2 is on how and why the body holds onto fear, pain, and overwhelm. And then section 3 is, what do I do about it now? How do I heal it, even when it's been causing me physical health problems, whether that's inflammation, autoimmunity, metabolism, metabolic syndrome? There's so many conditions, physical health conditions related to stored trauma in the body. And knowing that, how do we actually repair? And I'll just cut to the chase. It takes an integrative approach. We have to address the mind, all this chatter and mess in our mind, but we also have to address the body, because even as I've worked with your clients in the past, even just putting a pillow over our belly and the relaxation that they experienced as they felt like, I have something helping to protect me. I don't have to brace and guard to protect myself. So there's so much body work that needs to be done. And then the biology. So there is a biology of trauma. It needs to be addressed. And that's what I go into in my book.
I love it. Congratulations. We've been talking for a while through the process of your writing this book. And as a friend, I'm very proud of you for getting this body of work out there, because you've been working for so long helping masses of people heal their trauma and help them have that compassion for themselves and start to heal themselves, through very simple strategies that you teach. So congratulations. It's going to be a huge hit. Is it available now?
Well, people can pre-order it. It is
Okay.
available to order on Amazon.
I love it. Good for you. And everybody, check out the show notes where we have information about Dr. Aimie, but tell us your website also, Dr. Aimie.
Yeah, they can find me at biologyoftrauma.com.
Okay, beautiful. And don't forget to buy her book. This being the Heal Your Hunger show, I have one last question for you, and that is, Dr. Aimie, what is your deepest hunger?
Hmm. My deepest hunger is for authentic connection.
Beautiful. Well, I love you and I feel authentically connected with you. So hooray for that. So thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate you and your message and all your wonderful work. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next show. If you're ready to get off the dieting roller coaster ride and finally make peace with food and with your body, talk to a Heal Your Hunger mentor about what steps you need to take based on your own history with food and weight. Go to healyourhunger.com and register for an emotional eating breakthrough session and see how fast you can experience real change. It's a complimentary evaluation, but there are limited spots available. So go to healyourhunger.com and register to speak with a mentor today.